Hi, there's Dr. Brian, and we have Dr. Paul with us today, who is our guest blogger. Dr. Paul is talking to us about...
We're talking about the joint pain with change in pressure, barometric pressure, and altitude, basically.
So, for the average person, what's barometric pressure?
Barometric pressure is basically, well, you won't feel it in regular days, but it's basically a constant pressure that exceeds in our body, where whether we're in a ground level or in a higher level, it's basically a pressure that's constantly being pressurized in our body, basically.
So that's the pressure of the air.
Yes.
So when we look at the weather map, if you remember, they often will say that it's a high and it's 1,050 kilopascals, which is a lot of pressure on your tyre. You should only put 22 in.
Yes.
And then they'll have a low that's 900. What happens when those two pressure systems come together?
Well, it usually means there's a big storm starting to happen, and it's usually when big storm happens, there's a very sudden change, especially. There's this very sudden change in the pressurized, and that causes a very low pressure system coming in.
Where the two edges come together,
yes.
And that'll actually cause some weird weather.
Yes.
Often a lot of wind, because all the low pressure's running into the high pressure's running into the low pressure zone, which is why you might get an onshore wind at night, because the cool air is going to the hot air, which is good. That's the southerly buster. So that helps us to understand why storms are involved rather than slow pressure change. So I think what people might have experienced is with a storm and sudden change, that's when they get the pain, not with a slow weather change. So does the research indicate that it's something to do with the speed of the pressure change that causes the pain?
It's usually people usually complain when the pressure is like very sudden change, like a rapid sudden drop of pressure, basically.
So the weather might change between lunchtime and afternoon tea.
Yes.
It's sort of sunny and then it's raining.
In a very short time, yeah.
Yeah, excellent. And there's usually cold involved. So there was some indication that temperature was involved?
Well, temperature is usually kind of like a secondary kind of factor that comes in with like a low pressure, pressurized system coming in.
Yeah. So people with joint issues often are more sensitive in cold weather, and that's the reason that sometimes old people go to the heat, because they get less joint pain. So there is a concept that the two together accelerate that, so the low pressure plus the cold make it more uncomfortable. Does it affect every joint in the body? Does it affect your spine, or is it often another sort of a joint that people notice?
It usually affects the major joints. When I say major joints, it has to be pretty big on like a hip, knee, or even your shoulders. And it has to have, like, based on like patients who's actually complaining about these joint pains based on change in barometric pressure, they usually had some sort of like a fracture in their joint, or some sort of like a fracture around the joint, or even a little bit of older patients with complaining about some sort of like a joint changes, such as like arthritis or osteoarthritis.
Sure. Okay, well, that makes lots of sense. So what can we do? Is there a solution?
Well, there are a few solutions. There are a few things that patients can do. First thing is, because the temperature drops quite suddenly, a warm pad or a little warm
hot water bottle?
Hot water bottle will help you out. Just warming up the joint will help to decrease the pain. Also, because the joint that's affected is mostly arthritic, the movement is actually the key to being freed out and then having less pain.
So go out for a walk but rug up.
Yes.
Very good idea. And do some people find that a compression sleeve can help? Has that been suggested as a solution?
Well, it hasn't been suggested by a lot of clinician or scientists, but I think compression, I guess, braces are mostly what people go for because they feel it's a little stiffened up or anything like that. But it's also kind of recommended by other physios as well, because they think it's had to do with the pain has to do with like a swelling of the joint, so they're trying to compress the joint as much as possible.
So if the logic is that low pressure is creating the pain, if you then pressurize the joint with a compression sleeve, like even a compression tights that you might use for if you're an athlete, you put that on to actually create some warmth and also a bit of compression to maybe stabilize the pain in the bone. Well, I think that there's a good read available on the website, and there'll be a link in this to take you there. And we'd love it if you could actually leave a comment and let us know what your experience is. There'll be a prize for the best response. Thank you. Now I've got Denise here. Hello, Denise.
Hi.
She's got a wave.
Hi.
We were just talking when Denise came in today, and she was mentioning the bad weather gives her pain, and then we talked about Dr. Paul's blog. So what's your experience, Denise, over a number of years?
Yes, and I have suffered from osteoarthritis for a number of years. I have noticed over all this time that weather is a factor in how my bones and my pain reacts. Like if the weather suddenly turns cold, or I can sort of actually predict when the weather's going to change with my aching bones. But
you know when to take an umbrella.
I definitely do. But I would firmly say that over the years, even though my husband thinks I'm nuts, that the weather is a contributing factor to how I'm feeling and how my bones are feeling and aches and pains.
So the next time he contradicts you, could you get him to leave his raincoat and hat behind?
Yes, definitely, definitely.
And then he'll actually just begin to listen to you when he's wet.
Yeah.
Don't let him share the umbrella.
No, I told you this last week, so too bad.
Too bad.
So
thank you for the contribution. That's helpful to know that you and all the others like you are not nuts.
Well, that's
it's
good
real.
to know. That's good to know to have my everything confirmed. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thanks for talking.
Thank you.